Hi there, my name is Sheridan Hanson. I'm an assistant professor of horticulture with Utah State University Extension. I'm located in Davis County, Utah at the USU Botanical Center. We have 100 acres here on site where we run several different types of gardens. My specialty and background is with edibles, so herbs, vegetables, fruits, that kind of type of crop is what I specialize in. So I'm very excited to be here talking to you today about container gardening with herbs. So let's just dive right in and talk about this really fun topic. This is what we're going to cover today. We have a half hour, so we're going to kind of touch on all of this stuff very quickly. We're not going to spend a lot of time going very in depth, but I should be able to give you enough information so that you can be fairly successful. So we're going to talk about selecting containers, the soil type that you need to purchase to put into those containers, the light requirement for herbs. It's not the same for all herbs. How to water effectively. Do you need to fertilize? Is that an absolute must? How to select plants, a few basic tips on basic container design, and then some indoor considerations for your plants. So why container garden? Why is this attractive to people? Because a lot of us are dealing with limited space, limited time, and the idea of putting a plant in a container means that we can garden when maybe we don't have a big backyard, maybe we live in an apartment or a condo, but this makes it so that we can garden. We have this increase in urbanized areas, and I know that you all are in California. I am in Utah. Utah is extremely urbanized and we are growing very quickly. So this idea of container gardening is very attractive to people who are moving into these smaller spaces. And it's easy to move plants when we have adverse weather conditions. I know that sometimes when we plant, we have an unexpected freeze or cold temperatures. There's not a lot I can do if I've planted a big garden that's in the ground. I can cover things and I can try and help myself. But with a container garden, it's really easy to go in and pick it up and just move it out of the weather. And we get this idea of design. We have this fun design quality that we can add to our balconies, to our decks, to our patios, that gives us some interest, that catches our eye, and is also functional. So herbs work really well in containers. Of all the vegetables and all the different types of crops that you can grow in containers, herbs lend themselves well to this because the plants are generally quite small, which means they have a smaller root zone. They don't need quite as much soil available in order to create a big, beautiful plant. They usually have lower nutritional needs. They're not producing fruit like a tomato or like a pepper or a melon. So we have a little bit lower end nutritional needs, which makes it easy for a gardener to meet those needs in a container. And they have this really fun ability to add some dimension, some texture, some interest. And one of the great things about herbs is they add aroma to the area. So if you brush by an herb, you may get to smell that wonderful aroma. It's an added bonus. So to select a container, there are a few things that you need to think about. Number one, we want to make sure that our container is large enough to accommodate a mature plant. It's very tempting to put a plant in a container that is a little bit too small right from the beginning. And that's because our plant is small. It hasn't reached its full mature size. So when we put it in a great big container, expecting it to reach its full size, and it's this little tiny plant, it doesn't fill the space right off the bat. And we feel like maybe we didn't do what we were supposed to do. So, but we need to kind of think about that large, mature size. So making sure you look at the tag on the plant that you purchase and see if it's 1 foot across by 1 foot tall. We need a container that can handle a plant that size. So we want to make sure that we get a good 8-inch, 10-inch pot to accommodate that full size plant. We also want our plants to, or our pots to be well draining, which means that we have a drainage hole at the bottom of the container. This is really, really important. Too often I have people bring in plants to me, send pictures of plants to me. They've planted in mason jars, something without a drainage hole, and we're trying to figure out what's wrong with their plants, and come to find out they have this pot or container that was not meant to drain or accommodate the needs for the roots. So roots have to exchange gases just like leaves do. It's really, really important. that they have these areas, these pockets within the soil that have gases, carbon dioxide and oxygen, for them to change these gases at the roots just like they do at the leaves. Also, we want to have a container that's made from a material that can withstand the weather. So there's nothing worse than, purchasing a container, putting all of this into it, and then watching it degrade over the winter or when we have storms. So we want to make sure that we have a good, high quality, sturdy container. So I know that you can select containers of all different materials: metal, plastic, terracotta. That one's probably my favorite because it looks so natural and pretty. But there are so many different types of containers that you can select and use. Just make sure that they're well draining and appropriate sized. There are some other options out there for containers. Self-watering containers are one that I get asked about a lot, and they're wonderful. You can make your own. Here there is a picture on the right-hand side of a self-watering container, and you can make it. It's very easy to do. There are a lot of YouTube videos online that you can look up. It will show you how to do this, and it gives you kind of a little bit of flexibility with the watering schedule, and that's a great thing for busy people. We can do upcycled containers, so we can use things that wouldn't normally be a container, but we can turn them into a container for ourselves. So you can see these wagons. Now note the shallow root zone on these wagons. There's not a lot of space for roots. We're going to do very small crops and these things like basil. You can throw some lettuces in if you're interested in something like that, but something that doesn't take a lot of root space. The coffee cans are a great idea to upcycle as well. They have a little bit more root zone space. You can find vertical planting options. I see a lot of people planting pallet containers, and that works really well, again, for people with small spaces that need to go vertical. It kind of saves you a little bit more space, but remember, again, that root zone is going to be very small. There are stackable containers that you can purchase, hydroponic options that work well for certain crops of herbs. But the things that you mostly want to avoid are toxic materials. Make sure that if you're getting a pallet to use as a pallet garden, that it hasn't been sprayed with any kind of preservative, anything that's going to leach into your root zone and into your plants. Anything that has lead paint on it you should avoid, and any kind of chemical treated lumber. So if it's pressure treated, or if it is a railroad tie type base, then you don't want to use it. You want to look for something else. So we have these containers. Now we have to fill them with soil. So what kind of soil do we want? That if you go to the nursery and stand in front of all the soil, there are a million options. So you want to make sure that you get the right type of soil. You really just need a general potting mix that is lightweight. The reason we want it to be lightweight is these containers need to be moved from time to time. So you're going to want to be able to move them. And we want the roots to be able to go down through that soil very easily. So if we use a heavy soil mix, it makes it difficult for roots to spread in that area. Some soils come with fertilizers already added, and that's not necessarily a necessity when you're looking at soil selection, but it doesn't hurt anything. And your soils may contain different types of materials, things like coconut coir, peat moss, perlite, vermiculite, compost. These are all things that are added to these soil mixes to help lighten the soil mix, to help retain moisture and nutrients. All of these things work to keep our plants healthy. When you get your general potting mix, whichever one you select, you're going to fill your container. And you want to fill the container within an inch or two from the top. We want to leave a little bit of a lip on the top of our container. And that's so when we water, we can fill that top up with water and the soil doesn't spill out over the top. I often get asked about layering materials inside the containers. And the answer to this question is we don't need to do this. It's not necessary. There's a great quote that says, layering is desirable in cakes, but not in planters. We don't need layers. So what happens when we put like layers of gravel at the bottom of our containers, we get this, it's kind of this weird physics thing that happens. So the top layer of soil has to completely fill and saturate with water before it will allow the water to move down into the next layer. This is called lithologic discontinuity. And we want to make sure to avoid this because that will keep that water at the top saturated for a longer period of time. And remember, I told you that we need those air pockets down around the roots. And the longer the water sits there, the more likely we are to develop root rots. So we can actually contribute to root rots by putting in gravel or sticks, that type of thing, it's kind of counterintuitive to what you think will happen. Once you have your containers, you've filled them with soil, you've planted up these beautiful little herbs, you need to know where to put them. And a lot of this has to do with the light requirements for our plants. Most herbs require part to full sun. And by full sun, I mean 6 to 8 hours of sun. It doesn't have to be continuous. You can have 4 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening, or however it breaks up. Part sun is 4 to 6 hours of sunlight a day. So if you're in a location where temperatures are extreme in the summer, that's how we are in Utah. I know that parts of the country also experience some of these extreme temperatures that we have as well. You're going to want to adjust the placement of your plants because that sunlight can be extreme, especially in the afternoon. So if we can place them in a location that gets morning sunlight with a little bit of afternoon shade to kind of give it a break at the end of the day when the heat is really on, it will really help our plants to thrive and not be burned. I get asked a lot about how to water effectively in container gardens, and it is a little bit tricky. We have to kind of think that we have this smaller water holding capacity because we're dealing with a container, this little tiny space, and the roots can't extend outside of that container. They can't find water elsewhere or run into water in any other location. So these plants are very dependent on us to add water to the container for them. These plants that are in containers are up, they're exposed, they get a lot more heat. The soil heats up faster in containers and it will stay warmer longer. So that means that our plants are going to have a little more water. And they're also subject to wind. We can have intense sunlight like we just talked about. So we need to check our containers every single day. And when the heat is on in July and August, I check my plants even twice a day. I check them in the morning and I check them in the afternoon just to make sure. Every now and then we'll have a very hot, windy day and it requires another dose of water late in the afternoon to keep my plants healthy and happy. So we want to make sure that we are watering effectively and that we are getting water to our plants. Now, the best tool to know if your plants need water is to use your finger. And you're going to check your containers every single day, if not twice a day, using your finger. And you can take your finger and just dig it down into the soil and feel how dry the soil. If the top 2 inches is dry, you need to water. If it's still very nice and wet, no need to water. You can also pick up one of these very simple soil water meters from Amazon. They're about $10 to $15. And they kind of help you see and give you another visual cue as to how wet or dry the soil is. These are not foolproof, but they do kind of help you start to understand how quickly your plants will use water. So this is very simple. You just take and stick the probe down inside the soil and it will tell you if it's dry or if it's wet or if it's somewhere in the middle. But if those top few inches of soil have dried, it is time to water. Like I said, you may have to water daily depending on a number of factors. So plants need water, not just to move minerals and to move nutrition through the plant, but they also need water to cool. So what happens with a plant is it takes up water through the roots, it moves up through the stems and into the leaves, and then it opens these little holes on the bottom of the leaves called stomata. They kind of look like fish lips underneath a microscope. And when they open up those leaves, they release water vapor into the air. And water is a great conductor of heat. So when they release the water vapor into the air, they also release stored heat with it. And that is how plants cool themselves. So if it's a very hot day, a plant is going to need a lot more water to cool itself than a little bit of water on a very cool day. So all of these environmental conditions or climatic conditions can contribute to how much water a plant needs. So temperature, wind, the size of your plants, a big plant versus a small plant's going to need a lot less water. Our container type, if we have terracotta that's unglazed, water is going to evaporate out of the sides of the container versus a container that is glazed will not have that problem. It will retain water a little bit more. Our container size, so the amount of soil that we have and the amount of water that soil can hold. and how well that soil type holds water as well. So that's where things like perlite and vermiculite come into play, because they can also help hold water. So when you pick up a soil bag and you're going to fill up your containers and it says added vermiculite, that's because we're trying to help hold water in that soil. Fertilizers are another thing that I get asked about a lot. And with our containers in general, we're going to be watering more frequently because they dry out faster. So watering more frequently means that we're going to be washing the nutrients out of the soil even faster. And a lot of these soils, when you pick up a bag of soil, it doesn't have a lot of nutrition in it. They're soilless mixes, so they don't come with nutrition. We have to add it. So we're going to have to put in some of this nutrition, these macronutrients, which are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. We're going to have to add those to the soil and to the water for our plants so that they are available. Plants have to have these macronutrients to grow. So you can there are a couple of ways to do this. You can get a slow release fertilizer, something like Osmocote, and you can mix it into the soil at the time of planting. I often do that. You can also fertilize with a water-soluble fertilizer. Now, if you use a water-soluble fertilizer, please note that water-soluble moves through the soil faster. It's usually a much lighter fertilizer and it's taken up by the plant very quickly. So you will have to fertilize monthly with a water-soluble complete fertilizer, versus with the Osmocote, you may have to fertilize at the beginning of the season and maybe mid-season. When I say a complete fertilizer, so if you were to look on your fertilizer that you pick up, there's always 3 numbers. The first one is nitrogen, right here, the 18 is our nitrogen. The second one is phosphorus, that is 6, and then we have potassium. NPK, potassium is 8, and this is done by weight. So if I was to weigh this bag, 18% of this bag would be nitrogen, 6% of the weight would be phosphorus, and 8% of the weight would be potassium. These are all very important for plant growth. So nitrogen helps our leaves to green up and pushes green growth. Phosphorus produces leaves and flowers and fruit and helps to form all of those structures on the plant. Potassium is great for roots and the overall plant growth. All of these different macronutrients contribute to growth in some way, shape, or form. So they are needed for the entire plant and for the whole plant to be healthy. Now, when we go to select herbs, there are a couple of different types we can select. We can select annual herbs. These plants go from seed to seed in a single year. These are things like basil, nasturtium, cilantro. They are able to be planted and produce that seed in a year. Biennial herbs form leaves the first year, and then the second year we'll see a stem with a flower. These are things like parsley and dill. Perennial herbs are long-lived. They can live for 2 or more years. They may be herbaceous, which means soft-stemmed, or they may be woody with kind of tougher woody stems like what you find on a lavender plant. But examples of these types of perennial herbs are thyme, rosemary, mint, sage, chives, comfrey, chamomile, and tarragon. Basil is a wonderful addition to your herb garden, can be used in salads, pasta, appetizers. It's often used dried, and you can very easily dry it to use for later. One of the things with basil is it likes to flower, and once it starts to flower, the flavor starts to degrade. So one of the tips on basil is to pinch the tops. So this little growing stem right here, the very tip top, as that starts to grow, I can pinch it and it will produce side growth and it will slow down the flowering. It will give me nice bushy plants and will help me to get a much better crop than if I didn't pinch it. Cilantro or coriander. Coriander is actually the seed. Cilantro is when we harvest this plant for its leaves. This is often used in Mexican cooking. You may be very, very familiar with it. It's used in a number of different types of ethnic cooking throughout the world. It's actually a wonderful herb. Some people say it tastes like soap. There's actually a genetic component to that. This can be sown by seed, and it is a very short-lived crop. So you sow it, and then it continues to produce or continues to grow until it produces leaves. Eventually it will bolt and produce a stem with the seeds, and then it's time to rip it out and put it back in. And you can get several crops of cilantro every single year. Parsley is another one. This is wonderful. You can get curly leafed parsley or you can get flat leaf Italian type parsleys. I love the flat leaf thyme types. but it's used in many different types of cooking. This one loves full sun, and it is a biennial. So if you want to avoid that flower stalk and the woody growth, you need to pull it up every year and replant as a transplant every single year. Thyme is another wonderful one. Now there are a lot of types of thyme out there. If you're going to use it for culinary uses, there are a few that are better than others. So French thyme, lemon thyme, and oregano scented thyme are better for cooking than some of the other types of thyme. So keep your eyes open for those. These need a little bit of air circulation. They can get some fungal pathogens that develop on them. So we want to make sure that they have that good air circulation. Rosemary, now if you're in a cold place like Utah, rosemary can sometimes not overwinter. So we look for hardy varieties. This is a perennial. It can live for multiple years. But the hardier varieties are things like ARP. That is a wonderful hardy variety that typically overwinters in Utah. This year it didn't. We saw a lot of dieback on that ARP. It's kind of marginal here. But there are some other types that may grow in your area, and you may have to do a little bit of research, but Tuscan Blue, Spice Island, and Gorizia are all wonderful types of rosemary that are very fragrant and good to use for cooking. Sage, again, this is a wonderful plant for cooking. It also is very good at attracting bees and supporting pollinators. So if you're interested in supporting the bees, plant sage. You can dry this very easily. There are a number of different types that you can use. Common sage, pineapple sage has more of a fruity flavor to it, Greek sage, golden sage, and there's a purple sage called purpurea. Lavender has a lot of really good oils in it, and that's what gives you the aromas. These plants all have the little packets of oils on them that give you that wonderful smell. Again, it can be used for cooking, but you can also use it for aromatics. You can dry it and you can put it in little pillowcases, all of those types of things. You can put it in soap. It's a wonderful thing to have. And there are a number of varieties out there that grow well. Just do a little bit of research and find out which ones work in your climate and your area. Oregano and marjoram are wonderful again. These are perennials again, can be used fresh or dried for cooking. And oregano can tolerate, and marjoram can tolerate part sun. So if you're in a location that doesn't get quite full sun, this is a really good choice for you. It's also excellent at supporting pollinators again. I love the Greek oregano. That one's probably one of my favorites. And now mint. Mint is a problem for some people. It can be highly invasive. It's a perennial. You want to make sure that you put this one in a container. So when we're talking about container herbs, this one needs to go in a container because it has this invasive nature and can spread and be very aggressive. I had a friend that lived in California. She put mint in one of her beds and it grew out into her lawn. And so every time she mowed her lawn, it smelled amazing, but her lawn was also mint. So make sure that you put that in a container. So a little bit about container design. There are a few ways that you can do this. A lot of the times we talk about filler, thriller, and spiller. So the filler kind of fills in the areas in between the thriller and the spiller. So thrillers are tall. We usually put them towards the back, and they kind of give us this eye-catching focal point. And then we have spillers, things like thyme, anything that droops that will come over the side of the container and kind of give us this focal point and several different heights and create a beautiful container for us. You can also plant according to culinary selection. So you can do a whole container of just different types of basil, or you can do, if you wanted to do something for a turkey dinner for Thanksgiving, you could do a whole container with all of the herbs that you would use for a Thanksgiving or a Sunday type dinner. So there are different ways to do this, and it's very, very easy. I hope that we have given you some great ideas of something you can do in your own backyard, on your balcony, on your patio, somewhere in your yard where you can incorporate herbs. They're a wonderful thing to incorporate, not just for culinary use, but also for mental health, for giving you a contact with nature, and for helping you to get a green space into your life. This is a wonderful thing to incorporate to help you feel like you are connected with the earth and all of the wonderful things that are around you. So thanks so much for watching. I'm happy to take questions. You can also email me very easily if you have more detailed questions, I'm happy to dive into anything that you need further information on. Thanks so much.